This is a Squiz Kids podcast. Your fresh take on what's happening in the world around you.
Each fortnight, we give the world globe a spin and see where we land. Then we take the kids of Australia on an audio excursion to visit that country and its people. I'm Christie Kijurina, and today on Squiz the World, we're visiting a place playing host to the 2024 ICC T20 Women's Cricket World Cup. It has an ancient history, but is a relatively young country. It's the home of the magnificent Bengal tiger and is one of the most densely packed places on the planet. Can you guess? Strap yourselves into the Squiz Kids super-fast supersonic jetliner as we take off and take a squiz at Bangladesh.
Just the facts.
Bangladesh is nestled in to its west, north and east of a big neighbour. It's India, and it meets the enormous Bay of Bengal to the south. It's one of the flattest countries in the world, with most land sitting less than 10 metres above sea level. That's like shorter than a giraffe.
What?
More than 700 rivers crisscross through Bangladesh, and one of the biggest is the Padma River. Now, you might have heard of it because as it flows through India, it's called the Ganges. Water is super important in Bangladesh. It provides the fish and water that farmers need to grow crops in a country where most people still live in rural areas. Bangladesh is also home to the largest mangrove forest in the world. Mangroves are plants that can tolerate salty water. The forest is called the Sundarbans Forest, where the famous Bengal tiger prowls. This powerful animal is a symbol of strength, courage and pride in Bangladesh. Sadly, the Bengal tiger is endangered, with many of the remaining population living in this mangrove forest. Luckily though, the government and world organisations like the World Wildlife Fund have put protections in place to help restore its population. This tiger is so important to Bangladesh that the national cricket team is even called the Bangladesh Tigers. More on that later. Now, this might surprise you. Bangladesh has not 4, but 6 seasons. And one of them is the tropical monsoon season, where heavy rains flood huge parts of the country. And because Bangladesh is so low-lying, meaning its elevation isn't very high at all, remember the 10 metres, when the rain comes, it can cause major floods. And sometimes hundreds of thousands of people have to leave their homes. And Bangladesh is only a little bigger than 2 Tasmanias combined. But it's bursting with over 15 times Australia's population. That is a lot of people in a tiny space. And with sea levels on the rise, experts warn that in the next 10 years, up to 30 million people might have to abandon their homes. Whenever you travel, it's important to know a bit about the history of the place you're visiting. So let's do a little bit of
Time travel.
People have lived in what we now know as Bangladesh for at least 20,000 years. But it wasn't always known by that name. The region was historically part of Bengal, just like the famous Bengal tiger. Today, 99% of the population speaks Bangala, which is also known as Bengali. But there are over 36 Indigenous languages spoken across the country, reflecting its rich cultural diversity. Bengal has a long history of art, literature and storytelling, and some of that creativity was influenced by the Muslim Mughal Empire, which ruled the region between the 16th and the 18th centuries. The Mughals left a lasting mark on the architecture, food and the culture of Bangladesh. But then, in the late 18th century, Bengal was taken over by the British Empire. When the British left in 1947, the land was given to Pakistan and became known as East Pakistan. It took a fierce fight for independence, but in 1971, Bangladesh was finally recognised as its own nation. And here's a fun fact. Today, about 50,000 people in Australia trace their roots back to Bangladesh. That brings us back to the present. And now that we've learned a little bit about where Bangladesh came from, it's
time for school.
School is compulsory from grades 1 to 8 in Bangladesh, meaning that kids have to attend. Just like in Australia, public schools provide free education for primary school students, but here's the catch. Secondary school, grades 9 to 12, isn't compulsory, but a lot of kids do continue to do their studies. The school year in Bangladesh runs from January to December. So while you're already on summer holidays in December, kids in Bangladesh are wrapping up their final exams. The school day usually starts around 8 a.m. and finishes between 1 and 3 p.m. Some schools, especially in rural areas, have morning shifts, so the kids can work in their family business or farm in the afternoons. Most kids do wear uniforms, just like in Australia, and when it's time for lunch, many bring a homemade meal, often including rice, veggies, lentils and fish, or maybe a tasty snack like paratha, a type of flatbread, or samosas. Oh my gosh, sounds delicious.
Yummy!
As for the subjects, students study Bangala, the national language, English, math, science and social science, plus Islamic studies or moral education for non-Muslims. PE is taught as well, but it's not as big a deal as it is here in Aussie schools. Speaking of PE, why don't we find out what Bangladeshi kids play in
Sport time.
We mentioned at the top of the podcast that the ICC T20 Women's World Cup is being hosted by Bangladesh. And I think it's fair to say that Bangladeshis love cricket. Cricket is the most popular sport in the country, with huge crowds gathering to watch their national teams play in the men's and women's teams. And they're both ranked amongst the best in the world. But cricket isn't the only sport Bangladeshi kids enjoy. Have you ever heard of kabaddi? It's the national sport of Bangladesh, and it's totally different from cricket. Kabaddi has been played in South Asia for thousands of years, and it's kind of a mix of wrestling, bit of tag, and lots of strategy. It's a game where players take turns running into the other team's half of the field, tagging as many players as possible, and then try to run back to their own side without getting tackled. The trickiest part, while tagging the other team, you have to hold your breath the entire time and players chant kabaddi, 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 kabaddi to show that they're not breathing in. Whew, that's tough. If you want to have a go, and it is super fun, I've stuck a link to a video of the rules in the episode notes. Whew, we have learned a ton about Bangladesh, and now I'm starving. I think it might be
dinner time.
When it comes to dining in Bangladesh, there are a few important rules to remember. For starters, many Bangladeshis eat with their hands, but only the right hand. The left hand is considered unclean because it's used for personal hygiene. So it's never used to pass food or to eat. As for the food, Bangladeshis love their rice, fish curry and lentils. Fish is a huge part of the diet, and Bangladesh is one of the most vegetarian-friendly countries in the world, with people eating on average just 4 kilos of meat in a year, and usually only on special occasions. Compare that to Aussies, where the average Australian eats 89 kilos of meat every year. Wow! And let's not forget about dessert. Sweets are a big favourite, and many of them are made with milk. I've included a link to a simple recipe for a dessert called sandesh in your episode notes. It only has 3 ingredients: milk, lemon juice, and of course, sugar.
Time for the Squiz.
This is the part of the podcast where you get to test how well you've been listening. Question number 1. Which country is Bangladesh surrounded by on 3 sides? Starting you off with an easy one, the answer was India. Question number 2. Which majestic animal lives in the Sundarbans Mangrove Forest? Good work, kids, if you said the Bengal tiger. Question number 3. How many seasons are there in Bangladesh? Well done if you remembered that it's 6 seasons. Well, that's all we have time for today. Thanks for staying curious about the world and joining me on this incredible trip to Bangladesh. Now get out there and have a most excellent day. Over and out.